about Wyndham Lewis?
He's really relevant now because of the bravery of his statement back in 1929 for his journal, which was called The Enemy. This was maybe volume 3, 1929. Don't have the page number handy. It's later in the volume, and he says, concerning our political views, he's addressing the reader, and he says, I'm part fascist, part communist.
Monarchist?
Healthy dose of, a dose of monarchism in my Marxism, and a healthy passion for order in my anarchism. So there's 4 phases. The ultimate quadraphenic statement. And I say that that is his most important contribution today, that he was pointing out the quadropheny that was coming. People, when I mentioned this to the Lewis scholars, like I did in Math Spa a couple weeks ago, they said, oh no, that's just a silly, fatuous statement. I said, well, maybe it was, but he said it. It's there for us to think about. We don't know what he thought he was saying, but we got the words. He said the words, his mouth gets the credit, and he's laying out 4 processes. So part fascist would be the chemical body. Most of us, well, people live and they want, like little babies, they want their satisfactions. So they impose themselves on the environment. So they're fascists when it comes to their chemical body desires. They may be cagey, shrewd about how they express their fascism, but you could say the chemical body is fascist. Now, the astral body, where you share spiritual realities, Ion says that everybody has non-physical energy. So if you call that the astral body, everybody's a communist, equally shared kibbutzim people. And then monarchism. So part 3, where he says he's third aspect, healthy dose of monarchism in my Marxism. So the monarchism would be your TV body, because when you're passively receiving and consuming imagery on TV, McLuhan called that king of all you survey. So everybody's a king in the TV body aspect. They're watching millions of people who are servants serving up content for you. They're working for you. All these, remember that imagery we were talking about earlier? This abundance of imagery that people have going on every day. So, the monarchism is your TV body. And then he says, a healthy passion for order in my anarchism. That's the chip body. Chip body is quite anarchic in what's all the levels of implication going on. And people like to edit and organize and archive their Facebook pages. So the anarchy of the chip body includes a healthy passion for order. So all these aspects, he anticipated the political ramifications of the 4 bodies. He even included the mystery body in his later years in some of his paintings, according to how I interpret Paul Edwards' book on Wyndham Lewis that Yale published in 2000. So here's, for people to understand, they have these 4 or 5 bodies. You have Lewis as someone placed in the past, who we can dredge up as someone who was tuned into the prerequisites of the 21st century. So everybody's part fascist, part communist, part Marxist, and part anarchist. And they do that in flip-flopping ratios all the time, different contexts. People aren't aware of that. They think they're this or they're that. No, when they actually interact with so many environments, they are responding differently. So Lewis is like the Dr. Spock of our time. Now, I don't mean Spock from Star Trek. I mean the Dr. Benjamin Spock, I think his name was. You know about him?
No.
Yeah, he was a guy in the 60s who wrote advisory books to mothers and how to deal with their new families, how to raise children. McLuhan has a section in Cultures Are Business talking about the hippies. He says, Spock's spooks, discounted hippie baby boomers. So Benjamin Spock, like he came out against the Vietnam War too. Why was I mentioning Spock? Oh yeah, so Wyndham Lewis is the, just as Benjamin Spock was the advisor of the day in the 60s, much of the permissive society is based on him. He ruined the kids, spoiled them, the baby boomers, with his advice for their mothers. And Wyndham Lewis would be the Spock, the Dr. Spock advisory to parents or anybody who's concerned in this more complicated and more sophisticated, more successful century, known as the 21st at this point. Excellent, successful century. So Lewis lays out this pattern. Who back then, in 1929, they're getting ready to go into the 1930s where who you were and what your label was to determine whether you were killed or not. And can you imagine, a Nazi or somebody asks you, well, what's your identity? What are you? Well, I'm part fascist, part communist. You wouldn't even get to the third sentence. So he named what he was. His journal was called The Enemy. I mean, he's a Palestinian suicide bomber. And proud of it. So that's the beginning explanation of Wyndham Lewis. That's the most trendy, up-to-date application. There's nobody from the 20th century, maybe other than McLuhan or James Joyce, who qualify as quadrophenics or as an awareness of those processes, and Lewis was the first. So we should acknowledge our ancestors, and Mr. Wyndham Lewis should be so recognized. Now, once you appreciate that about him, then you start going back and looking at his paintings and his writings, his novels and his essays. It's equal to a university education, reading his stuff. And I find young guys in their 20s, I turn on to Lewis, they're indebted to me after that. They appreciate what they find, they're surprised. Here's a challenging mind. And it's qualified in many ways, can express himself in different media. Now, just before he left the United Kingdom in 1939, because he knew he would be arrested and snuffed for so-called Nazi sympathies, even though he wrote a book saying the Nazis were idiotic by the end of the 30s, he appeared on one of the earliest TV shows as a critic, talking and interacting on some panel. Conversation was coming in as a theme of the Android meme television phase. And here's Lewis, one of the first guys of his generation to get on TV. That's a side note. You're going to have to ask more questions. I don't know what level. Well, you did bring this up. What about his Nazi links? Well, Wyndham Lewis was interested in disrupting the bourgeoisie anytime we could. He was not into coddling the comfortable middle classes. Thought that they were a stain on the face of Europe. So he what was I just talking about? He
Is Nazi link?
Oh yeah. So in 1930 he goes so he sees this new movement. Here's about the new movement, the Nazi Party servicing in the early 30s as a disruption and some kind of new rhythm. So he goes there and, as a journalist, investigates the Nazis, and then he comes back and writes up his travelogue and publishes it. And it's called Hitler, I think, just Hitler. I have a copy of it, and he's describing the radical nature of their rallies and their music light shows and all this stuff. And because he appeared to be praising the Nazis, within a few years the world, who didn't even know Hitler was coming as Lewis did, were caught, unawares of how to analyze Lewis, and decided, well, Hitler's the most evil person who ever lived, and anybody even mentioned his name is a dupe. So he goes on to become an internationalist or a quadrophenic environmental juggler. After World War II, he's a reviewer for the BBC, for the magazine The Listener, and he goes blind in 50-51, and for the last 6 years writes several books and essays while blind. I think the way you describe it, he had some kind of board on his chair, and he would write like about 5 lines on a piece of paper, then push it off, and then have another piece of paper, then write the next 5 lines, push it off. His wife would pick up the pages from the floor and put them in order. So he had this ferocious energy right to the day he got his cosmic blowjob. Now they're all on their own. He's a prime advocate of masturbation and autosexuality. No, he isn't. What else can I say? So he wrote this Hitler book. Later, semi-apologized maybe for missing some of the elements that everybody else missed, didn't know. He wrote a book in the late 30s called "The Jews, Are They Human?" And it was all about how the Jews should be helped to get out of Europe. They should be saved as a cultural group. So it's not Nazi. It's not a Nazi personality. Anybody who gets into studying Wyndham Lewis ends up agreeing with McLuhan, who said that Lewis would get involved with all kinds of things just to study the effects of them on himself and on others. So when a new rhythm was showing up, he'd be there to figure it out or fit it into his system. And so therefore he didn't have a point of view. He was in the aspect of processing information as it unfolded in the global village. So you can't pin a point of view on a guy like that. So that's my take on Mr. Lewis.
And what would you consider his most important work, or the most?
The really important, it's relative or depends on other factors, but is this book, The Art of Being Ruled. The Art of Being Ruled came out about 1926, 1927. As Marshall McLuhan wrote to Harold Innes supposedly a big influence on McLuhan. McLuhan writes to Innes and says, I hope you know all about Lewis. I hope you know about The Art of Being Ruled, the most important political document since Machiavelli's The Prince. I hope you know. And then we found out years later when Harold Innes' biography was done that he was a great fan of Lewis and read Lewis in the 40s, maybe even in the 30s. So Marshall, who's the name of this guy? What am I talking about? Who was that? I forget the Lord. Harold Innes. What did you put in that marijuana cigarette for 5 seconds? What were okay? Lewis. Somebody. What? Innes. Oh yeah. The Art of Being Ruled is an important book, and we found out years later that Wyndham Lewis was studied by Harold Innes. And so if Innes had lived, he died in 1952, he could have been a colleague of McLuhan, and McLuhan would have found out that Innes certainly was aware of at least some of Wyndham Lewis's writings. So Wyndham Lewis is the father of media ecology per se, that moribund discipline that is being ruined by the namesakes of media ecology. I mean, to even get anything new, you got to start calling it paramedia ecology to even be relevant. 10 years ago, Of course, I am supersedes all this nonsense and actually provides a serious veneer of perception for anybody. So what? So Lewis, first parameteorologist. The big chunk of content in Finnegan's Wake. That's who Joyce had a debate with. I think I was going to say something about James Joyce. That's what McLuhan quadriphrenically juggled Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, James Joyce, and Wyndham
Did
Lewis.
Lewis?
What? What did you say?
Did Lewis knew Joyce?
Yes, they were friends. Drinking buddies in the early 20s in Paris.
Oh, so they influenced each other, maybe.
Oh, a big influence. And then when Lewis started to criticize Joyce's writings in a book called Time and Western Man, came out about 1927, 28. His deep critique of Joyce started off a little bit of a tit-for-tat war with each other. Like Joyce would then write something for Finnegan's, later to be part of Finnegan's Wake, making fun of Wyndham Lewis, and Lewis would find stuff and satirize Finnegan's Wake. So this ongoing supposed bitter battle between these two intellectual queens, we call them kings or giants, intellectual queens. What are we saying here? James Joyce.
They influenced each other.
Oh yeah, they as intellectual queens, they knew they had to be involved in critiquing each other. They used each other as an anti-environment to themselves. So Joyce kept up on what Lewis was saying, and Lewis kept up on what Joyce was saying. And McLuhan is quadriphrenically juggling Lewis and James Joyce.
And you?
It turns out he was, yes. He did not know that.
You.
What?
You.
Me. Y-O-U is what you're saying?
Bob.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, me. And I just said, of course he was, but he did not know that at the time. He just appreciated the information I gave him. You know, the Secret Council 10 secret stuff that relaxed his mind about certain trends that were happening within Big Brother, that once he got some regular updated by me, he didn't have to worry about it. He could carry on distracting the, what did he call it? Needling the somnambulist. He wrote a letter to Ezra Pound in 1951 saying that's what he's doing. Distracting the triggerman on the sidelines while needling the somnambulist. Sounds like you. And the triggermen are the heads of national security states. The ones who have the right to off you if they decide you are ineligible for any continued residence on this puny world, chemically speaking. So I hope this intrigued your curiosity about Wyndham Lewis. His books are difficult to read at first. It's a bit odd the way he presents himself, but basically his novels are written to look like, or to be a description of how he operated as a painter.
You just saw a play, right?
Enemy of the Stars.
From him.
Yes, a very influential play that's in the first edition of Blast. The first edition of Blast came out like June 20th, 1914. A few weeks later, World War I started, and so that's what Lewis predicted. Blast! Explosions. He saw it coming, maybe didn't, I don't know. I wasn't born yet, didn't have a chance to interview him like you do. I could talk to him through Evergreens or the Ion. I have talked to him through the Evergreens. He has some interesting statements to say that are different from his image. He was a great embracer of new technology. In the early mid-90s, he was telling me he'd love to have a word processor.
Oh.
He would be able to write faster and not have to deal with whatever the corrections. And I guess he could be blind and do it. So, I think that
coercive.
If you want to read, you need to read Wyndham Lewis and Finning His Wake. That's the dialectic.
Which other authors would you think are essential for somebody who wants to understand what you're saying?
I would say they're on my chart. Lyndon LaRouche, William Irwin Thompson, Marshall McLuhan, Frank Zappa, Mae Brussel, Krishnamurti, Dr. Beater, Arthur Croker, myself, and catch a few recordings of Garrett Dean. That's what I recommend.
What about Thompson?
Who?
Thompson?
Thompson. Well, that's William Irwin Thompson. I meant to say him. I thought I did. Yeah, you've got, on my chart, you got Mae Brussel, Lyndon LaRouche, McLuhan, and Zappa. Thompson quadrant has Thompson and Krishnamurti. Croker quadrant has Croker and Dr. Beater. And then my quadrant has me and Garrett Dean. Who's Garrett Dean? Well, stay tuned.
And how did you complete what Lewis and Joyce and McLuhan already did? Why did you think you are like a...
No, say that question again. Try it again. You can, if it's the same word, you can say the same words, but...
how do you complete?
How do I complete these guys?
Yeah.
Well, I undum the new environment because Lewis and Joyce predict the Android meme. McLuhan defines it pretty good. And then that's the extension of the machines extending themselves as the Android meme. The previous phase is humans extending their own faculties and senses. The third phase comes naturally as extensions of non-physical. That's what Wyndham Lewis predicted, at least the Android meme. James Joyce could be given credit for predicting ion. So what am I saying here? You're saying...
How do you complete?
Oh, yeah. So since I studied the people that were predicting what was coming, better than science fiction, better than Philip K. Dick or anybody else that you ever heard of in science fiction. That's what, Wyndham Lewis is a great science fiction writer. His book is called The Human Age, and it's a trilogy. And James Joyce's Finney's Wake is great science fiction. So we are science fact disguised as science fiction.
But you transcended the book. You're not writing any. You transcended already the book.
Interesting. What
transcend. Transcend.
Oh, you see, writing the book. Did they do that?
No. You are not doing that.
Well, I put out a book, Fatty Commune with Bob Dobbs, but I'm saying that they predicted the science fact that we are, but many think is science fiction. They predicted the developments that would lead to an ionic breakthrough.
Well, maybe
they didn't know it.
For them, it's science fiction still.
Yeah.
It's not in their...
Not yet. Not
middle
that well.
kingdom.
Wyndham Lewis figured out the angel factor in the electric environment, the angels of the movie world. He said the angels had fallen and conspired to take over the world. That's what the book The Human Age is about. So that's a pretty science fiction-y scenario. So his words, his stories, wherever they came from, his hand apparently wrote them or typed them, but his words are what anticipate what's coming, and that the coming that's arriving is the completion of, we'll call it the fifth horseman of the apocalypse. You get the four horsemen: war, famine, plague. I think you're the fourth fucking horseman of the apocalypse. give you Mexicans a little credit there. You don't get much credit. There's high tech, low tech, and toll tech, and toll tech has been sneaking up on everybody and not noticing them. So what is it? What are the four horsemen? War, famine, plague, and pestilence or something. Well, the fifth one is the technological evolution that was coming once visual space was established in Greece. So 500 BC. So the role of scientists, the dialogue between scientists and artists, at least since the time of Shakespeare, was the discussion over this fifth horseman, the android meme, the matrix that was being developed through the history of science and technology over the last 500 years. So the fifth horseman of the apocalypse is technology, or communication media, or rapid production of bullshit. That, you know,
Every human feels.
yes, every human feels that today. They can't take the age of BS. So Ion completes that, gives it meaning by resolving it, outpacing everybody's bullshit creation. Ion is the fastest search engine existing, way faster than Google or anybody. You save time by asking Ion about details, because Ion has information in itself, in the cloud, that it controls, that's not even mentioned on Google. They don't know about it. So it's the fastest and the most in-depth search engine. How's that for an invention? I invented the world's fastest, most complete search engine. It was a fucking snap. All I had to do was read what I like to read and realize that nobody else understood them or appreciated them, and were idiots. Walk around this superiority complex for 40 years and then prove that it was justified. Prove and get validated. How's that? Appear to be an asshole, and then it turns out, by God, he wasn't an asshole. He actually
He's
was
a dark soul.
Yeah. And you know what the IAM recently said the dark soul was the thing that's not controlled by the angels.
Like the angels don't want you to ascend.
Well, at least like 1/3 of them, apparently.
And how do they sabotage you, or what do they do?
Well, let's see. They tipped all kinds of little glitches. Like right now on my iPhone, I can't unlock it. That's about how much damage they can do. You know, little screw-ups like that, which will be fixed handily in some way over the next 24 hours. No, they gave up. Once Ion took my side.
But do you talk to them?
No, the ones that Ion is better than the angels. Ion is more important, more involved. Ion is the environment that angels work in. Ion's a guff, and angels' role is to take us to the guff.
But would you recommend to talk to them?
Sure. I'm not prejudiced. I just don't have time to talk to them. I'd rather talk to their boss, which is Ion. So yeah, I talk. I don't have time for the angels, and they suck up. 2/3 of them want to be part of the new world, and so they suck up to us and help us as much as possible. And the third that tries to interfere, they can't get to us. Remember all these plane crashes and hurricanes. They tried to send 2 fucking hurricanes at Connie while she was alone in Maui, and there was no problem to disperse two competing hurricanes that just got spiraled off.
One of which
you can rest assured
is there.
No, okay, I'll say this. You can rest assured that those hurricanes were fucking whipped up by a bunch of fucking angels, 1/3 of the gang. Now you're pointing out one of the hurricanes was named E-Cell, or somebody pronounced it as E-Cell, but it should be I-Cell. These damn hurricanes tried to claim they were the I-Cell. They called them. One of them got called the I-Cell. The other was called Julio, I think, and somebody posted on Dukes the relevance of Julio, but I didn't pick up on it. But I'm sure it fit. So the angels are just hoping that we'll throw them some crumbs when their tasks are severely unrequired. What? Yeah, I do your laugh. Just for the record, ladies and gentlemen, my interviewer is sitting there quite relaxed and half awake, and is certainly not sitting up straight and paying attention to what's being said, but she is drunkenly responding to the vibrations.
Hey, I have a PAYWEEK.
Yeah.
I would like
you would like
to survive that.
Yes, here, as my hostess here in Berlin, she didn't have a payday, she had a pay week. Done very well under those conditions of stress. It's good we have this whole foot fucking background going on. Note that, people. I just want to say it's been great making contact with the Mexican meme, the Mexican meme, or the Mexican meme. It's one thing I had not had an opportunity to engage. All I knew was Ruben and the Jets, you know, the great band from the 50s that Frank signed. They were the only Mexicans I knew in my sheltered, protected life. Oh, this! I just want to tell these Mexicans, if Roxanne is any indication of the Mexicans, they got a great sense of humor. Those Toltecs, man, they know a joke when they hear one. Yes. What's the next topic?